hit something there. Not sure what that was. Well, there's your problem. That does not look good. That looks like bits of piston on there. Alright guys, today we are going to go over our adventure that we had at Six Summer, which took place last week. Overall, we had a really good time, but there were a lot of ups and downs. So let's get into it. If you guys didn't see the previous video, we took my 1981 Ford Fairmont station wagon, which is sitting right behind me, and my dad's 2010 Chevrolet Camaro SS. Both cars are swapped with a turbocharged Vortec 4200. Both of them are running a fairly similar setup with a few minor differences. My wagon has a 4L80E with the lockup and the overdrive. The Camaro only has a turbo 400, and the wagon has a slightly smaller turbo. Other than that, they are quite similar, and we kind of did that intentionally just so that finding spares wouldn't be so hard. So let's get into day 0. If you guys aren't familiar with these events, it consists of 5 days, but they often call the first day where you get the car registered and tech inspected, they call that day 0. And on day 0, they offer a test session for cars who are sort of coming in at the last minute. Maybe you just got it running the day before the event. And it's great for people like us who were working on our cars up until the last minute. While we were sitting there in the tech line, it was neat to see the 1320 video guys making their rounds, and it just so happened that Kyle spotted my station wagon here, and he kept looking at the engine bay as he walked by, and finally he asked me about it. The reason that I swapped this car with a Vortec 4200 actually has a lot to do with Kyle Loftus, who is the owner of 1320 Video. One of the first DVDs that 1320 Video ever put out was a DVD on Drag Week 2005. This DVD that they put out just so happened to have one of the builds that was a strong inspiration for this one. It was a 1966 Chevrolet Nova that had a Vortec 4200 built by the guys at Self Racing. And it was the first evidence of a high performance Vortec 4200 that I had ever seen. But my goal with this car was to do it on much more of a budget and with a much more basic set of parts and not stuff that's so exotic. So it was neat to share that story with the guys at 1320 Video. They made a big deal out of both cars, and it was very flattering and very humbling. And I just wanted to comment on how cool that was. Now, if you guys followed the previous videos, you know that we were struggling to get both cars ready right up until the time that we left. And my wagon, I hadn't really gotten a good pass on. With the Camaro, we kind of knew that it was going to run decent, and there wasn't really any need to test the car on day 0. But my wagon, I was going to take every opportunity to test with it that I could. So on day 0, I decided to put the car into the staging lanes and make a pass. This pass went fairly well. The car launched great, and it made a very good pass, but on the top end, right around the 1,000-foot mark, it hit a safety in my ECU and the car shut off. Now, normally when we run our cars, we don't have EGT sensors on the car. We sort of just tune the thing to the, average AFR in our downpipe, and if the car feels smooth, we keep running it. In fact, this is how the Camaro is set up. We don't have any EGTs, we don't have individual O2 sensors. We just tune it off of the AFR and we hope it's good. And after having a look at the data, I was like, okay, one cylinder's hot, one's dropping in and out. I use Chinese EGT sensors. They're probably not even accurate. And it felt dead smooth on the track. Surely I can just ignore this and it won't come back to bite me. Next, we moved into day one. Day one, they require that you lock up your trailer and truck and do not access them for the rest of the week. So we did that and we got ready to get into the staging lanes to make our passes. The Camaro went first and my dad had a little bit of trouble doing his burnout. I was trying to set up a way for him to sort of bump in on the foot brake of the car, and I didn't realize that it would activate that two-step during the burnout as well while he was on the line lock. Furthermore, he didn't get a real good opportunity to get the car staged just because he had so much trouble in the burnout that he felt like the other guy was like getting ready to go and he didn't want to burn him down. So he was rushing to get into the staging beams and he figured let's just get a pass and it'll be what it'll be. The pass didn't have a great 60 foot and frankly the reaction time wasn't great either. These events require a 1 second reaction time and he had gone over that, so that time over that would be added to his slip. But he at least got a pass. Now, I've mentioned this a few times now, we had a lot of trouble just getting to this event. We had the transmission out of the Camaro 3 times before we arrived. I was literally wiring the car as we loaded it on the trailer. And frankly, it was just an amazing fact that we were even at the event. So Dad and I both had a conversation and we were like, you know what? Let's not get back in line. Let's just go with that pass. You know, sure, it's not great for the standings in the class, but we had already seen that it was going to require quite a bit faster of an ET to compete with the class. So it was time to move on to making a pass with my station wagon. So I lined up my station wagon with that EGT safety now turned off, and I made a pass. gas went great. It felt dead smooth and no more shutting off on the top end. And I got my new personal best with one of these engines, a 916 at 147 miles per hour. I was super happy with this, and as you guys know, I've been wanting to go an 8 with this car ever since I've built it. In fact, I've never been an 8, and it would have been very cool to do it at this event. So with that, we could see again that there was no way we were going to be near the top, and we decided to hand in our slips and hit the road. The drive for day one was a pretty short one, and I was very thankful for that. We went to the block party, hung out there for a little while, and very quickly we made it to our hotel. And being that we made it to the hotel early, we got to talk with a lot of other racers, got to hang out with Bryant Goldstone for a little while, and that was really neat. Day two was a little bit hotter than day one, which definitely wasn't ideal. The Camaro was first, and this time my dad was able to get onto the two-step and build a little bit of boost before he launched the car. It did much better today. It went a 948 at 150.00, if I remember right. Next up was my pass with the station wagon, and we tried a little bit more boost. Now, in those videos, you probably saw that there was a little bit of smoke coming out of the back of the car. And also, the car was not quite as fast. If we go to the in-car, you'll see why. Yeah, it was popping on the top end as well. I really couldn't figure out why it was doing that, and went back, looked at the data, and it took me a little while, but I found that it was losing its RPM signal. And if you guys don't know, that means the crankshaft position signal is losing sync. And this is really bad for an engine. You're at this real high RPM, lots of fuel flow, lots of airflow, and you've just cut off the spark in the fuel, and this could potentially lead to some lean fuel conditions, and it's just really hard on stuff. But I really wanted that 8, and you can see I was in and out of the throttle there, trying to make that happen, and it is what it is. So having now made a pass with both cars, we decided once again, we were going to one and done it. Let's hit the road. We will figure out the crank sensor issue at the hotel. And as for the smoke, I figured that was just a symptom of losing the crank signal. and we moved on to the next track. The route for day 2 was quite a bit longer. They took us to a cool old windmill, and then they took us to the Motion Raceworks headquarters. Unfortunately, they were not offering tours. And after like 270 miles of driving, we finally got to our hotel. We began to dig into the crank sensor issue, and I pretty much knew what the problem was. On both cars, as you know, we are running an external crank trigger setup that we are developing here at the Nivlac 57 house. And what I just found was we need a little more work with that thing. On the Camaro, we were able to get that crank sensor really close to the trigger wheel. And what I noticed on my Wagon is it could not get as close. Like the bracket just physically did not put the sensor close enough to the trigger wheel. That being said, I still fired the thing up and it ran, and clearly it made a couple passes and it seemed fine. I was pretty sure that was the culprit for why I was losing my crank signal. So Dad went to work modifying our bracket a little bit to get the sensor a little closer. He used an angle grinder, and we basically just kept cutting off little bits from the crank sensor holder until it got closer to the trigger wheel. He did one cut, and I threw it on the car, and it was still a little bit too loose. So I took the sensor off of the car again. He did another cut, and he freaking nailed it. We were targeting about a 17 thousandths gap between the trigger wheel and the sensor, and he got it to right around 19 thousandths. So I would say 2 thousandths off, that's perfect. Before we hit the road, my dad also noticed that the belly pan of the car was full of oil. And I figured my oil pan has always had a small leak. That's all it is. But I figured, you know, while we were at the hotel, let's drop the belly pan, get all the oil out of it. And I just kind of started looking over things. And I noticed that there was a lot of wetness around the turbo oil drain. So I started poking around, and I noticed that the turbo oil drain down at the pan was completely loose. So I was like, oh, okay, no big deal. I'll just tighten it back up. It probably rattled loose, you know, whatever. So I started to tighten that fitting up, and it just would not get tight. I kept, you know, wrenching and wrenching and wrenching and wrenching on it, and it would not get tight. Finally, I kept wrenching on it, and the fitting fell apart. And this was like a, oh crap moment, because it's a -12 AN fitting, and local auto parts stores don't carry AN fittings. So at this point I was like, oh crap, we're screwed. Like, what are we gonna do? Because we didn't bring any of that stuff with us. So my dad started to ask around the parking lot, and it turns out that one of the sponsors for the event, they do AN fittings. And I want to give a huge shout out to the guys at Red Horse Performance. Those guys are awesome. They picked up the phone, talked to my dad, figured out what he needed, and they drove 40 miles from where they were staying all the way to us. They showed up with the stuff to fix the problem. We literally measured the line on the spot, and they made the line in the parking lot. Frankly, this saved our week, and we would have been totally screwed if they had not come to help. So make sure you guys go check them out. I must say their fittings are very high quality, and I'm sure we'll be a customer in the future. Day 3, once again, I creeped up just a little bit more on the boost on my Wagon. And the Camaro, we decided to bump up the 2-step RPM on the trans brake a couple hundred RPM. This time, it was my turn to go first. And we got ready to make a pass with the car. you can see, that pass was a pretty good pass, no more smoke on the top end, and everything felt really smooth. However, when I was, got to the end of the track, shut the car off, loaded the parachute into the car, as I was starting the car, I noticed that things weren't right. As I was trying to start the car at the end of the track, I could tell things were really bad. Remember that EGT safety that we talked about earlier? Well, that was on cylinder number 3. And after this, I quickly pulled the spark plugs out of the engine, and it was really bad. It was clear that the number 3 hole had some really bad things happening to it, and this was not a good sign. But it was time for Dad to make his pass, so we moved on to that. Again, had trouble getting onto the 2-step on the trans brake, and he just let the car go when the lights came down, and the pass was a decent pass. And at this point, we had a decision to make. If you guys don't know, Six Summer is held in Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan. The places that they take you through are pretty remote. There are stretches of road where you have no cell service for like 20 miles at a time. And you don't see a house for like 10 miles of driving. I've been to places like this in the past, but like, it was like kind of scary, because it's like, what if I break down? Like, okay, I can't call anybody, and the next closest house is like 10 miles away, so like you pretty much have to like flag somebody down and hope they stop. So it was sort of a difficult decision to make, because both Dad and I, we wanted to finish the week really bad, but with my car hurt and Dad, he's in the class, but he wasn't really, competing for the win. It didn't make sense for my dad to abandon me and for me to potentially get stuck on the side of the road and, be stuck, unable to contact anybody, and, having to deal with that situation. So we decided to pull both cars out of the event, and we drove back to the trailer. Now, I should mention that my car, the issues that it had, still drove. It, sounded like a choo-choo train, but it still drove. And yeah, we were able to get back to the trailer with pretty minimal stops. The car was starting to overheat after a little while, but we would just pull over, let it cool off, fill it back full of coolant, and continue. And we did that a couple times, and we made it back to the trailer with like no issue at all. The following day, being day 4, I decided to tear the thing apart and just kind of see what went wrong. All right, starting to tear this thing apart, and turbo was dang near about to fall off. You can see these studs are like not even tight anymore, so that explains some of our noise, but it doesn't explain why it was cranking uneven on the starter. So let's keep going. Once we got the cylinder head off, I could clearly see that the piston had decided to excuse itself, and there was no way that we could have fixed that. Unfortunately, these pistons are not really something that's readily available, and the block was pretty screwed up. So I think we made the right call. The Camaro, however, still ran great, and we decided to let's just stay over another night and wait for everybody to get back on day 5, and we could just run the Camaro out of competition. So day 5 rolled around and we ran the Camaro. It once again was slow to spool. Dad couldn't get it onto the 2-step, and it was another sort of slow pass, but we had thrown a little bit of boost at it, and you could see that in the mile per hour. At this point in the week, both Dad, Mom, and I were all just toast. After standing in the sun for basically 5 days in a row and having very little relief from that, we all were to the point where it was like, okay, how about we just be done? So we spent the rest of the day chilling in the shade, and sat around for the award ceremony, and that was basically our 6 summer experience. So let's talk about some stuff that came out of the event. One, I am very humbled by the amount of you guys that came up and talked to us at the event. I heard so many times from so many people that we were the reason that they even came to the track, that they came just to see us. I've always heard, like, in the past, like, the amount of draw that people like Cletus McFarland have to these Dragon drives, where like he will like double the amount of people that come through the gate just by showing up to the event. And I never would have thought that we would have any effect on that. And it was very humbling that clearly we had. So many of you were so kind, and it was great to meet so many of you. And also it was great to meet a lot of new people who had no idea who we were. Additionally, it was awesome to meet up with people who I've been following on the internet for quite a while. Specifically, Fonzie Novello, the owner of the Fairmont. If you guys aren't familiar with his build, you should go check it out. It's a Ford Fairmont sedan that he swapped an Ameri-Barra into, and the thing is pretty quick. In fact, at some point during the week, we were hoping to have gotten them to line up with each other to sort of have the Ameri-Barra and the Ameri-Barra, go at it. But I unfortunately melted a piston before that was a possibility. So that was a cool experience. He was a super cool guy, and you guys should go follow his stuff too. So let's talk about what we're gonna do going forward. The Camaro did very well. The only thing that it really needs is probably a bump button so that we can get it onto the 2-step and bump the car into the staging beams. The Wagon, on the other hand, needs quite a bit more. I loved how the car staged. I was able to foot brake it into the beams and then put on the trans brake. But a side effect from that is the converter is pretty loose. The flash RPM for the torque converter was like 7,500 RPM, and it only drug it down like 100 or 200 RPM during the shift, which was cool, but was probably not great for, it was probably consuming a lot of horsepower, and we probably could have gotten the car to go a little bit faster if it was a little bit tighter. Also, we melted a piston. But putting that aside, I want to go back and sort of relook everything on this car. just because it's not performing the way that it should. For the amount of boost that I have in the car, it should be making a lot more horsepower. And over the next month or so, we're going to be going back to the drawing board on quite a few stuff. So make sure that you look forward to that. And with that, I'm going to end this video off here. We had a great time at Six Summer, and if you guys are thinking about whether or not you should do a drag and drive in the future, I would highly recommend the SICK events. They are a ton of fun, and I can tell you, you will not regret it. So make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.